So continuing my series talking about the iconic wines of the world, we've opened a bottle of 2007 Tâche tonight because I'm about to be heading to Bordeaux for the Entrepreneur tastings and so on, and it's nice sometimes to taste a nice Burgundy before drinking a lot of Bordeaux. And this is a really interesting wine to talk about, I think, for several reasons. One is because it's a rather big vineyard, 5 hectares pretty much exactly. And one of the great strengths of the historic monopole vineyards of the Côte de Nuit, and there are a few in the Côte de Beaune as well, is to have a big surface area like this. And it spans quite a wide range of altitudes and rather different soils. And in fact, obviously it's a single vineyard, it's a climat all of its own, it's its own appellation. But in a sense, you also have the advantages of a blended wine. Because of the diversity comprehended within the parcel. So I think that's one of the things that accounts for why La Tâche is such a consistent wine. If you compare it to Romanée-Conti, which has a pretty uniform exposition, it's small, it's pretty uniform mesoclimate. La Tâche is much more diverse, and so perhaps I could get a job in marketing coming up with something like this. But you could say that Romanée-Conti is like the soloist, and La Tâche is like the orchestra. What else is interesting about it? I think it's also the most powerful wine that Domaine Romanée-Conti make by some margin, and I think that in turn has something to do with the volumes that are produced. In fact, it used to all be fermented, as I understand it, in one very big fermentation vat, very big by the standards of Burgundy, at least, not by the standards of Bordeaux. And when you have fermented a large volume together, naturally, without that much in the way of temperature control, it's difficult. Fermentation temperatures get a bit warmer, and so you get a bit more extraction. I think that partly accounts for why La Tâche has a more muscular, more structured style than some of the other wines that the Domaine makes. Now it's made in more than one vat, so I think perhaps it's become a little less of a monster than it sometimes used to be in the past, actually. What else is interesting about this wine? Very large percentages of whole bunches, really great vine genetics, so that the ratio of solids to juice is just naturally quite high. Makes a naturally concentrated wine. It's not really possible with that kind of vine genetics to make very high yielding, massive crop with a lot of juice. That's just not within the plant's DNA, quite literally. Then quite classical macerations with whole bunches, and that's another interesting question. I mean, there's a long history in Burgundy of destemming. In fact, people often think like it must be more traditional because it's lower tech, but not so necessarily. And people were destemming even in the 18th century and before. If you look at the old literature, the choice to leave the stems, I think, it really related both to the site and especially to the vine genetics. When you have that kind of vine genetics with very small berries, it's technically difficult to destem them. You end up sometimes losing a lot of little berries, and it's just not particularly interesting compared to what's the case when you have larger, more juicy clusters. And then maturation. This is all in 100% new oak. So it's sort of new oak is an unfashionable thing these days. Back in 2007, I think it would have been almost entirely Francois Frère. Now DRC are playing around with some other coopers like Le Grange, which belongs to Botham. I think some other interesting coopers in the mix, but this is all Francois Frère, all new. Since 1980, they've tried to avoid racking the wine when they can. I don't know what was the case in 2007. And very exotic, spicy, aromatic nose. You definitely get the whole bunch effect in '07. Which is not the ripest vintage of the century. And there's even a slightly mordant quality in the finish. I think one of the challenges for a domain like this, producing a wine like this, is just the weight of expectations people bring to a wine like the Tâche is so enormous that it either precludes any kind of discussion of the wine's demerits, or it means that people are easily disappointed because they come to it expecting a lights out moment, which is something La Tâche can provide. '07 is more of an easygoing, rather charming, aromatic, delicate vintage, only 13% alcohol on the label, maybe even a little less than that, I don't know. Certainly chaptalized a bit. And, it's just a very elegant, attractive, complex wine without being some sort of momentous occasion in one's life. And I think that's definitely something that's a challenge for wines like this, and all of these wines that the market is sort of inflating to incredible prices today. How can you what is one looking for when one opens a bottle like this? But for me, this is showing really beautifully today. It's evolving quite rapidly. The 08s of DRC are also evolving reasonably rapidly. Not as a criticism, but they're actually quite ready to drink, quite open, and they're showing quite a lot of tertiary development already. So if you have some 07 Tâche, why not open one tonight?